In today's episode and the next, we are switching gears a bit to focus on a mindfulness tool we heavily implement here at LIA. I will be joined by two phenomenal Washington University students who are currently interning at a local St. Louis based health and wellness tech startup called Airy. Welcome back to the Lighthouse International podcast, lighting the way for your child to find their purpose and passion and live their best life. This is founder and director Eliza Rivas, and today I am joined by two very special guests, Stephanie and Bosan, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Bosan. I'm from Taiwan and I'm now working at Airy.
My name is Stephanie. I'm from Marietta, Georgia. I'm also working at Airy, and I am a full-time student at Washington University in St. Louis.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We're excited to go over today's episode. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about one of the mindfulness techniques that we use a lot on Lighthouse International's campus, and it's also something that's used a lot worldwide, and that is self-reflection and the role that self-reflection can play in navigating life transitions. My question to you as you listen through this podcast is, do you have a self-reflection process? If so, what does that look like? And on a scale from 1 to 10, how effective do you feel it is? Let's talk a little bit about self-reflection, what it is and what it isn't. I would like to start with Stephanie.
So let's say a little bit about Airy. Airy is a tech startup in the health and wellness industry, and we are making an app that serves as a GPS for your thoughts, helping you navigate from problem to resolution, from emotion to action in 3 to 5 minute sessions.
Fantastic. I love it. How would you define self-reflection? How does Airy define self-reflection?
Self-reflection is a form of introspection that takes the form of a series of consecutive questions to yourself that often bring up emotions or make you uncomfortable, but ultimately help you realize something new about yourself or about your world that help you navigate yourself in that world.
Fantastic. Awesome. Do you, in your own personal lives, do you guys self-reflect? And do you know a lot of people that say they self-reflect?
So first, I would like to introduce some misconception of self-reflection as well,
Mhm.
because some might think they're really good at it, but is it? For example, thinking deeply about themselves without structures doesn't really count as self-reflection, because self-reflection needs to have intentionality and structure. For example, we can set a dedicated time or maybe guide questions. By doing so, we can inspire more deeper thoughts. And also, it's not just a solitary activity, because personal introspection is important, but it's more important to talk with others so they can inspire you with different perspectives.
Okay, I like the dual approach on that.
A lot of people confuse self-reflection with rumination. People often have something that bothers them and they think about it. They think, what went wrong? What I did wrong? I need to do this in the future. And what's happening is not that they're actually challenging themselves to learn something new, but that they're saying, I will do better next time. And this thought process doesn't actually lead to a new behavior. What it does is it makes you feel like you solved the problem, so you don't need to worry about it anymore. What usually happens is people fall into the same processes again. And I can talk a little bit more about what that looks like in the future. But the ideal self-reflection will actually challenge you to think in a new way. It will be difficult and it will reveal something that you didn't know before.
And what brings about that revolution or that revelation? What brings about that new idea, the new process, the ability to kind of step back and see the forest through the trees, if it's not just thinking about the problem and, oh, I need to do something different next time?
Yeah, so usually you start with a feeling of tension or discomfort in your life, and usually you'll know when that happens because you'll feel it. Oh, something went wrong. I feel off. And this is usually a sign that your expectations don't line up with reality. And one way that people usually resolve this tension is to change their reality to line up with their expectations. But another way you can do it is you can change your expectations to line up with reality. And this is what I see self-reflection is. So by really analyzing what causes this and challenging your thoughts, you can figure out what misconceptions you have about reality and how you can realign your expectations and your self-image with what's actually going on.
You know, it's funny when you said that, it immediately brought to mind, I don't know if you guys have seen this because you're college students and not as into cartoons as I am as a mother, but the new movie Inside Out 2 has recently come out, and they did a genius job at introducing the emotions that tend to arise like in teenagerhood, young adulthood, and all of that kind of thing. And there's this one moment in the movie where throughout the movie up until this point, Joy had been taking all of the bad memories and like chucking them to the back of Riley's mind, right? Like, we don't need to worry about that. We don't need to deal with that. And Riley's self-identity had become, I'm a good person, I'm a good person, I'm a good person. Well, then things happen and she makes choices that she knows within herself is not what a good person would do. And she didn't know how to reconcile that. And I'm not going to spoil the movie, but there is a moment where all of those experiences and those decisions that were considered bad flood back in. And all of a sudden, who she thought she was is like changing every second. And it reminds me of self-reflection, because in that moment, all of the emotions had to realize you can't pick, like you can't hand select who you are. It's everything that happens to you, every decision that you make, and how you figure out how to reconcile that. Through something like self-reflection is really where I would see that happening. And that's what I see a lot on our campus. So one of the things that we talk about is how we're a place where learners are free to fail forward. And part of that failing forward is the fact that reality doesn't change. Like, if I choose not to do my work, there's not a way to get rescued out of that. If I choose to be unkind, there's not a way I can finagle my way around that. I have to walk through what happens when you are unkind, or what happens when you don't do your work, but everyone else around you does, and those feelings that bring up. And so one of the ways that we use self-reflection in a practical way for children on our campus is that idea of, yeah, that really stinks to be there. I've been there too. I hated it. Like, that felt so bad on the inside. These are some things I did when I was in that moment, when I was making that decision, whatever the case may be. What do you think can make it better for you? So we can't change what's happened, and we can't change where you are right now. But what are some things that can help you walk out of that? What would you do differently if you were to do it all over again? What would you do differently? And what would that look like? And what would that sound like? And all of that sort of thing. So I love that concept.
I think that is why self-reflection is important, because we can record our past entries. For example, maybe it's mood trend. If I know I'll have a certain emotion during certain circumstances, I can know how to deal with it in the future. So when I face similar situations, I'll know, oh, I might be angry this time, and maybe I should take for maybe minutes or hours to calm myself down in order to behave better.
Oh yeah, that's really powerful. I do know there's a large body of research that says when you write something down, it does amazing things for committing it to memory and like helping you really think through things. And when you said that, it reminds me of two things, actually. One, there's a learner on our campus who is very tough-minded. Like, this is the line, this is what's right, this is how it has to be. And that learner it's very easy for that learner to lose their temper, to lose, you know, to get angry and upset when people are not doing what they consider the right thing. And that learner has had to go through several iterations on how do I stay in control of myself to where I'm still holding the boundary that I believe is right, but not in a way that turns everyone against me, not in the way that it becomes about me instead of about the issue. And she has had to like write down and post several things to try with her studio mates because they know how strong her temper is. And it was really amazing because just not that long ago, I don't remember when, we were having a discussion about this, and I asked her, like, what are you most proud of, or something like that. And she's like, one of the things I'm most proud of is the fact that I can stay in control when I'm angry now. I have processes and procedures because this is something I have had to like try something, get a system, see if it works, fail, try again, get input from other people, fail, until I found something that worked. And that learner's 10 years old. And if it can work at that age, you know, it could work for any of us, no matter what, because you can see it coming and then you can put those measures in place. The other thing it reminds me of is a lot of times in counseling for things like anxiety, depression, OCD, things like that, where you are doing things because you feel somehow something has gotten outside of your control. They'll often say that, write them down, write down what you were feeling, write down when you were feeling it, what was happening, all of that, because once you know, you can then put measures into place. Like once you know something's going to happen, anytime something like this occurs, you can put those measures into place. So I love that. That's super powerful.
I feel like adults do a little of that things. Like adults can do more about self-reflection. I mean, if a student is trying to learn himself, we should do it as well, because every time when we have a new role, maybe we have to learn something new so that we can face others.
Yeah, I was going to say, Eliza, listening to you talk, it sure sounds nice to have a teacher guiding you through your self-reflection process. We as adults don't always have someone else helping you notice your own flaws and figure out what exactly is going wrong that you can change. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of where Airy was born, out of the need to have an outside perspective challenging you to learn more about yourself in a way that you wouldn't ordinarily do on your own.
And with Airy, am I correct in that its target audience is really like teenagers and young adults, but anybody can use it?
Yes. One of the things Airy really helps with is navigating life transitions.
So in thinking about self-reflection for adults, like you said, who don't have somebody kind of guiding and coaching along, what is this supposed to look like? What is this supposed to sound like? What are some of the biggest challenges that came up in your research with adults as far as self-reflection, specifically in transition periods, like moving, new jobs, starting a family, those big life changes that really does change who you are as a human being? And how does Airy address those problems?
So as an international student, I have a really great transition problems right now. Because like I just come to the States last year, mm-hmm. and for me, I have to find a job to stay in the States before graduation. Mm. And so I applied for hundreds of positions, but I didn't receive one single interviews or offers for months. And this makes me feel so lost, because I was a top tier student in Taiwan, but right now I'm a nobody. And it's hard for me to really accept my new role because I have to get rid of all my egos.
Yeah.
And I think that's why Airy helps me a lot, because I'm asking like, what do you think I can do right now? I feel like I'm so stressed and nobody here can really understand me. And he'll provide me like, can you please list what do you want to do maybe in the future, or what's your goal in the future? And by answering those, I feel like maybe I'm being too rushed, because I still got 1 year. I can slow it down. And however, this situation didn't get better even when I got a job. So yeah, I work at Airy right now, but do you know that I actually want to quit after 3 days in Airy. But
Why?
I come to, it is because that I feel like we're not that structured.
Because it's a startup.
Yeah, and as
Yeah,
interns,
there's a lot
we're
of unknown.
kind of lost as well because we don't know what the product is meant to be. So I question myself, what do I really want to improve on my resume? And when I dig into it, I think I have to shout out to my career coach, Erica, because she makes me know that as a business analytics student, I might focus too much on data and coding. But in the industry, maybe leadership and communication skills are more important. And realizing that, I try to talk with my team leads more because I was an intern in Ernst & Young before. So I audited a lot of startups as well. And although they're startups, they do have a really structured procedures. So I told my team leads about this. And after that, we just launched our first pilot last week. And I think everything is going really great right now.
I love that. And so that a lot of those decisions started with the questions that Airy was asking you as you were doing your self-reflection, journaling, and kind of working through your emotions.
Yeah.
Oh, that is wonderful.
I mean, like, if it isn't for Airy's app, I wouldn't be here doing podcasts with you guys, even though I hated it at first.
I love that because that's really raw. That is what a transition feels like. There's a lot of ambiguity. There's a lot of no direction, not necessarily having like those clear angles. And so that is what a lot of people have to wrestle with. And it's interesting me hearing you because I'm well on the other side of that, just with Asian experience. And from my perspective, walking through that ambiguity and you figuring out, both of you figuring out, okay, how do I figure out what the end goal is? How do I figure out how to get there? How do I do all of this without someone telling me what to do? Because they're also figuring out because this is brand new. That's what's going to set you apart. That's what I base my entire school on. Like we are purposely ambiguous about almost everything to get learners into the habit of figuring it out on their own. How do I use resources? Where do I find resources? How do I know that those are resources that I can trust? And throwing something out there, and it might not work. And when it doesn't, we as guides, because it is a school, will come along and be like, that's interesting. You know, what did you learn through that? What do you think could have made that better? These are some options that also happen out in the real world. This is what companies do, or this is what governments do. What else do you want to try? What else do you think might work? Because that is what we call self-efficacy, the belief that I can do whatever it is I need to do in whatever situation I'm in. And honestly, truly, when I talk with business owners, when I talk with managers, when I talk with entrepreneurs, their biggest frustration most of the time is that their new hires have to be told what to do all of the time. And they don't have time to do that. Like they need to give you a challenge as new employees or interns or whatever, and just trust that you're going to take that wherever it needs to go. And if you come back and it needs to be adjusted a little bit, that's fine. They'll adjust it. But that's kind of what their hope and their expectation is. And one of their biggest frustrations is that people aren't doing that. So that's super interesting. And I love the role that self-reflection played in helping you wrestle through that, because I do think your identity changes in a better way on the other side of that wrestling. Awesome. I love that.
Yeah. I have two examples that I'll give. And the most prominent transition that I went through recently is the transition from high school to college, specifically a university that's generally regarded as a high achieving university. And so when I was in high school, I was one of the top students, right? And I was getting all these great grades, high SAT score, president of a bunch of different clubs. And when I came to university, everyone was high achieving and nobody cared about what I did in high school.
Yeah.
And a huge portion of what I had based my identity around when I was in high school is being a high achiever, the friends that I had in high school, the communities I was involved in, also in high school. And the process of looking to get into a good college.
Yeah.
Now that I'm in college, none of that matters. And the new measure of prestige is based on different things. And what I realized is I started feeling a lot of jealousy towards other students who were getting prestigious internships at companies like Microsoft and McKinsey. And the first step was labeling this as jealousy. A lot of people don't like to admit that they are envious because it's an antisocial emotion.
Mm-hmm.
The second step was asking where this came from. And one of the things I had to do is ask myself a lot of questions, a lot of the same questions, because the first answer that came up was the one that my brain came up with in order to defend me from the true reason I was feeling this.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked myself, why am I jealous? The first answer I thought of is, oh, I feel like I should have gotten that. Okay, that's not really the reason.
Yeah.
What's the real reason? Well, I feel like I need to be getting good internships so that I can show that I'm accomplished. That's not the real reason. And after several of these, I realized that the real reason is that what I consider to be a good person is someone who is smart and achieves a lot of things, because my identity is based around being smart. And I am afraid that if I base my identity around being a kind and helpful person, then I'm open to rejection. And I struggled with that a lot as a kid. And I was afraid that because I was bad at being a good person when I was 5 years old, I couldn't be a good person as an adult. And therefore, I had to base my identity around being smart and accomplished. And once I realized that, everything changed. And I was suddenly able to not only form more connections with other people and change the way I felt about my ability to be a good person, but also I no longer looked to other people as a source of prestige and focused on what I wanted to do with my career.
Oh, that's fantastic. And that started with the self-reflection you were doing through Airy and the question, because it has an AI component that does follow up with whatever it is that you're typing in, correct?
Yes. And one of the things that I worked on is adding prompts to the AI based on principles from dialectical behavioral therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. And one of my favorite questions that I added to it is, what does this say about you? A lot of times people will get into a rut saying the same things. Why didn't you study for a test? Oh, because I didn't feel like it. Why didn't you study for a test? Oh, because I had other things that I wanted to do and I didn't have time for it. Why didn't you have time for it? Because I was busy doing other things. That's not the real reason. What does it say about you that you don't want to study for the test? And when you keep going with this, you'll find that's the common answer for a lot of students, especially ones with histories of being very high achieving, is that they believe that if I study for this test and I still do badly, then that means I'm not smart anymore. So I don't want to study because I don't want to risk accepting the fact that I'm not as smart as I used to think I was.
Oh, that's so powerful. It really goes back to, so there's a whole school of thought in education, psychology as well, called growth mindset. I don't know if you guys have heard of this, right? So that's the whole concept. It's like saying things like, I'm smart, I'm successful, I'm maybe not successful, but specifically I'm smart. That's an example of a fixed mindset, because either you are or you aren't, and you can't change that. Where growth mindset is more process driven and effort driven. And on our campus, our entire construct is built around the idea that every child is a hero and every child has gifts and talents and abilities that are made to meet specific needs in the world. And when they combine those gifts, their passion, and work to fix this problem or make something better that is really important to them, that is what success is. That's them finding their calling and changing the world. And it could be changing the entire world. It could be changing their corner of the world. It doesn't matter. But that concept of who I am is not what I do. I do what I do because of who I am. It flips everything on its head, because then you don't have to be afraid to fail. And I think where you are is where 99% of at least students in the US, I don't know about outside of the US, but that's where almost all of them are. And that's also where, so a population that tends to do very well in a learner-driven environment are children who are gifted, highly gifted. And they often will struggle in traditional environments because they're boxed in, right? And because the things that matter to them don't necessarily matter to everybody else. But one of the biggest fears that is common amongst every gifted child I have ever met in the 20 plus years I've been doing education is the fear of failure. And specifically, that comes out one of two ways. Either they completely avoid it, like what you're saying, like, I'm not going to study, I'm not going to do this because I don't want to take the chance that I'm not going to be successful at it. So they never start. Or they're the ones that will work themselves up into an absolute panic, trying to do everything and not sleeping and not eating, and because they're so afraid to fail. And so I love that Airy gives a place where they can be very honest and raw about their emotions, what they're feeling right now. And it doesn't just stay there, that they keep asking them to dig deeper. They keep asking them to do what they have to do in order to arrive at what is that fear? Something's going on. There's something I'm afraid of. What is that? And then how do I navigate out of that so that I can take risks, that I can, try new things, that I can see what happens when I give my best and be okay with it no matter what the end result is. I think that's fantastic.
I think our goal is not to replace therapists, but trying to do similar things, because we know that therapists in the States is really expensive.
Ooh,
and
yeah.
Also it's time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
And also it's not 24/7. But with our app, we can do it in a really short time, and it's also always available because it's on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to let the users know that whenever they have problems, they can come to Airy, and Airy can listen to you. And by using mirroring technique, we can always ask for deeper questions so that you can self-reflecting more.
I love that. And another thing, like I said, I think this would be a great tool along with if you do need therapy or whatever the case may be. But one of the problems right now is there's a huge shortage of therapists. It can take a child, and that's because that's where I'm in this world more. It can take a child 6 months to a year to get in to see a therapist just to get evaluated for something. Like, it is a very long wait. And in the meantime, what is that? What can that family do? What can that child do? What can that teen do? Or that young adult? And so I love that it's filling a gap and meeting a need, not necessarily to replace anything, but as an additional tool or as like an emergency stopgap until they can get the help that they need.
Another thing I love about Airy is that it's available on demand whenever you need it. A lot of issues with therapists is that they only see you 9 to 5 Monday through Friday once per week. And you usually don't have a crisis 9 to 5 Monday through Friday.
Yep.
First of all. Second, a lot of the opportunities to learn present themselves in small interactions that you've forgotten about by the time you get to your therapy session.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I organized my friend's desk and my friends didn't like it. Now I feel bad. There's so much to learn from this experience. You're not going to remember it by the time you get to therapy, but Airy is always in your pocket to pull out. And in a 5-minute session, you can explore those thoughts and realize what it says about you and what it says about other people that this interaction occurred.
Mm-hmm. Now with Airy, for instance, say something like that happens and I'm in a moment, I'm having some emotions, I want to get that out, but I don't have time at that particular moment to be doing like the back and forth questions and whatnot. Is there a way that I can put in my thoughts and my feelings and then come back to it later to explore more of those questions with the AI prompts?
Yeah, so we have a free writing section, so you can record your emotions whenever you feel like you want to do it. And when you feel like you want to do a session, you can look at your past entries and maybe think of what you want to discuss later with LIA and Airy.
Okay, that's fantastic. Because I could see that happening quite a bit because of so many of those in the moment occurrences, for sure.
I think that's also our benefits, that because some therapists, they can't always have your information, but with Airy, we can provide your moments in every time. And I think we're not trying to replace therapists, but we can be a complement tool, because we can share our data with the therapist about maybe I feel certain emotions at certain situation. And when they look at our previous entries, maybe it can also help them to better deal with our problems and give better recommendations.
Is there a way, so say I am using Airy and I am seeing a therapist, is there a way that I can share what I've been writing in Airy or the emotions that I've been keeping track of? Or is it more something like I just bring it with me, kind of like when I go to the doctor and I keep track of my certain health stats, and then when they ask me, I just bring it up and look through and then tell them about it?
We're working on a feature that allows you to share all of your information from Airy to a therapist or a chosen other person. One of the things that I noticed in therapy is that your therapist has a lot of different clients and they don't have time to read through your journal. And Airy serves in part as a journal where you can write, what happened every day. And part of what Airy does when you're doing your self-reflection is it can reference things that happened in the past. So for example, one entry you might say, I feel like nobody likes me. And Airy might reference, 2 days ago in your journal entry, you said that you felt like you had all of your friends and everyone loved you. And that's one of the things I love about Airy. Airy helps you fact check your perceptions with what's actually happening the rest of your life.
I love that. It allows you in your own life to kind of step back and see the forest through the trees, so that you're not making those mountains out of those molehills. You're not making something bigger than it actually is in the reality of your life. I love that. There's several things that we do on campus that have the same end goal. Like for instance, self-reflection is a really large part for our learners in getting we're a mastery-based learning system, so we don't have grades. We don't have classes per se. They have subjects, and they are challenged with mastering those subjects. And when they have built these mini portfolios to prove they've mastered the subject, they get a badge. It's gamified learning. And often a component when I'm done with all of the challenges in these badges, because we have academic-based badges, we also have character-based badges. So things like there's a badge for integrity, curiosity, servant leadership, those types of things. And there's always a self-reflection component in there where they're like, okay, what went well? If you were to do this again, what could you do to make it go even better? How would you suggest modifying this badge? Like, where did it not hit the mark? And you think, wow, this could really take it to the next level. Those types of questions are often in with the badges that we have. And then we also have a system called 360 reviews that I believe was taken from the business world, where at the end of every session, we have 7 sessions throughout the year. At the end of every session, they have to rate themselves and each other on, for us, it is how warm-hearted, so how kind and respectful you were, how tough-minded, how well did you hold boundaries for yourself and other people, and how well you kept your contract of promises, because they create a contract of promises that they all sign their name to. Like, this is how we're going to run our school. And so it's interesting because they can kind of take how they see themselves in that moment, in that snapshot, and compare it with how everyone else was experiencing them in that session. But then they can go back to on the past sessions and see Have they grown? Are there consistencies? Was everything else saying this? And I just had a really stressful, or lots of things happen this session, and it wasn't really who I was. But that's that same idea of being able to get enough data to be able to step back and see the full picture so that I don't make something bigger than it needs to be. And like you said, when you're not in a school system like this, when you're outside of school, period, there's not a lot of resources available to give you that information. And what I love about an app like this is it doesn't take a lot of time. Like I could do this, but it's going to take way longer because I'm not an expert in this. Like I'm not a therapist. Most of us aren't. And so being able to get the most bang for your buck in the shortest amount of time so I can really see these things about myself, I think is genius. Who can use Airy? Is it available? I know it's an iOS app, right? And then I've very sadly heard there's not yet an Android app. Very heartbroken about this myself. Is there plans to create an app? Is there a website people can go to, like Android users can go to use it? How is that working?
So for now, we are trying to perfect our system on iOS first, then we'll work on Android and maybe Windows system. And I want to jump back to your badge approach because I feel like gamification provides more incentive for people to record their emotions or their maybe self-reflections.
Yep.
For example, I think it works on children, like they feel a lot of sense of achievement when they receive those badges.
Oh, yes.
And I think it also works on adults because when we're playing online games, we always like to collect those maybe achievement lists to maybe gain some new equipment or something else. And I think this is what we're trying to work on as well. We want to make a gamification environment so that we can entice users to use Airy more often.
That would be fantastic because especially in your target audience, which is like 14 to 21-ish, right? Yeah. So in my age group, badges really don't do anything for most of us. It's not something we grew up with. And so like they're fine. Like I'll do them. The people my age that I know will get them, but it doesn't evoke any kind of real emotion at all. But I have a daughter who's 24, and from her age down, it is a completely different story. It is something I can't understand, honestly, but I go with because I realize it's a big, big deal. Like that, it matters a lot. So I love that you guys are building in a gamified component into that because it is very motivating, especially for things that are things I know I should do, but aren't the most exciting. And so I don't really want to, which I could see self-reflection being, that just doesn't sound fun, even though there's a lot of benefits. So being able to have a reason to do that, I think is great.
I think when we're interviewing others, a lot of people say that they feel like they have to do self-reflection or journal more, but they just couldn't do it. And I think Stephanie has a lot of thoughts on it, right?
Yeah. There's a huge gap between intention to do something and actual motivation to do something. Yes. And part of what actually motivates people to do something is fear of what happens when you don't do it.
Yeah.
A lot of people wait until the point where they just can't take it to stay the same.
Yep. And
so I have to change. Yep. But you don't always need to wait for that point. And going back to what you said about this 360-degree feedback, which my organizational behavior professor would be very proud of.
Yay.
You don't need to wait for someone else to give you feedback in order to get feedback. At any time, you have the agency to ask other people, how do you think I did? Yesterday, we had a disagreement. How do you think I handled it? Is there anything you would suggest for me to improve? Often, people have loads of advice for how you should handle things better. And they're just waiting for you to ask.
It takes a lot of courage to ask, though. It takes a lot of courage. I think it takes more courage than most adults are able to muster in a lot of those situations, at least the first time. Eventually, it gets better. And that's actually why when we do the 360 reviews, those are shared out publicly. So everybody, we are big believers in transparency. We don't do anything behind closed doors. Like whatever's going to happen, it's going to happen out loud, and it's going to happen in front of people. And so if you don't like that, then maybe you want to think about doing something else. Because we have to have courage to have those courageous conversations. That's like a whole school of thought in education about courageous conversations. But because they are so beneficial, you have to get into the practice of doing that. And it's really difficult. It's really difficult because that brings up a lot of my insecurities. I have to face where I'm not being awesome. I have to face where maybe I thought I was like killing it and really it's just mediocre. So do you feel like, and this will probably have to be where we wrap it up at this point, but do you feel like using an app like Airy helps me as an adult get to the point where I could possibly be courageous enough to start asking to get that feedback?
So one of the things that Airy does, and things that I would recommend for adults with self-reflection, is when you get to the point where you feel uncomfortable, number one, recognize that this is good. This is when you're about to learn something really exciting. Number two, lean into that discomfort. Don't shy away from it. And number three, visualize yourself doing the thing that makes you uncomfortable. It's very difficult to just go out and do something, but research shows that if you visualize yourself doing it first, you're much more likely to do it and feel more comfortable while you do it. You can imagine what's going to happen when it happens and realize that it's actually okay. The more you train yourself to do this, the more you will realize that it's actually a good thing, not a bad thing. And one of the things Airy helps you do is train yourself to get into that point by asking more questions, asking you to visualize it, and suggesting small action steps that will help you get to where you need to be. One of the questions you can ask yourself is, how would my life be different if I did this? Would it be better? Would it be worse? Would it stay the same? Another question you can ask yourself, that's I also added to the Airy app, is how would I feel if other people knew about this? That question can reveal that you do need to tell other people, and that you would actually benefit greatly, both you and the other person, from having this information known. It can also reveal feelings of shame and embarrassment, which are valuable lessons to you that you could do something different, or that something you're doing doesn't align with your values.
I love that. And we do a lot of that on our campus as well. So that's kind of the first point that you mentioned. That's what we call failing forward. So we work really hard to create a shame-free environment in our school for whatever, for your bad days, for, just bombing a project, whatever the case may be. And we do that through questions like that. So depending on your age, if I'm working with my Sparks, which are 5 to 7, and something just completely bombs, we're like, oh, well, that is interesting. Did you expect that to happen? Well, now it's time to put on our investigator cap and figure out, where did that go wrong? Like, where did I think I understand, but I didn't? Where did I think this was going to be how it ended, but it wasn't? Because we often will tell them, if I'm succeeding in everything, I don't have anything to learn. I already know it. So the only place I can learn is when I make a mistake, is when I fail. And that's a celebrated moment on our campus. We're like, yes, okay, now let's dig into this. What can we do about this? Where did you go wrong? And so anytime, like as they get older, for instance, where I see this a lot is in math. We use an adaptive software in math, but even in that adaptive software, to move from levels or to level up, you have to get everything right. And it is so hard to get everything right because sometimes there are typos, or sometimes you just miss that little small thing and they're like, ah! And so we're like, okay, well, did you get it wrong because you didn't understand the concept? Did you get it wrong because you were rushing? Did you get it wrong? Like, why did you get it wrong? Because that's the most important thing. It doesn't matter that you got it wrong. What matters is now that I did get it wrong, can I figure out why I got it wrong so that I can do something different in the future? As far as the second point you were talking about, and that whole concept of leaning into your emotions, I think that is probably one of the most impactful challenges you can give out to adults. So on our campus, there are often big feelings because they're children, right? And they have yet to learn necessarily how to mask or filter those big feelings. So they just all come out in all of their glory. And often the conversations that we have are things like, feelings are not right or wrong. They just are what they are. And it is okay to feel them. You are responsible for what you do as you're feeling them. So just because I feel an emotion does not give me the right to hit somebody or to yell at somebody or to be mean, depending on the ages of people that we're talking about. But it's hard to, I think it takes courage to go through those feelings. Like when you feel embarrassed or you feel sad or you feel scared or those more vulnerable feelings, it takes a lot of courage to just be open about it. I know one of the things I do in my family and that we do on campus that has seemed to be really powerful is naming our feelings. As a grown-up, I will say it feels kind of ridiculous at first to name your feeling in the moment. So what I'm talking about is you are with a good friend or a parent or a spouse or whatever, and they have had a bad day and they just say something that so really hits you. Like it was like uncalled for and it kind of came out of nowhere, right? So naming your feelings would be like, wow, like that really hurt my feelings. Like that makes me really sad that you said that about me. What's going on? And that feels ridiculous sometimes as an adult. Like not necessarily for children. I think we're all like, oh yeah, children, they have to say when they're happy or sad or frustrated or whatever. But as an adult to be like, that was really hurtful. What, you know?
One of the things that Airy does is after you've made a recording, Airy will name your emotion for you.
Ooh.
And it's fascinating to see what emotions it picks up on. Often I see it labels my emotion as angry. What do you mean? I'm not angry. Angry is what kids have. I'm an adult. I don't get angry. Yes, you are. You're angry. Now we need to figure out where this anger came from. And you are doing yourself a disservice by pretending that you're not.
Yes, very much so.
And if you stop feeling embarrassed, if you stop feeling ashamed as soon as you start your self-reflection, then you're missing out on this opportunity to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Eliza, how do your students usually feel when you ask them to self-reflect on their mistakes?
It depends. So one of the things that we check in with them and see is, are you ready to talk about this? Because a lot of times if I'm in a very intense emotion, and we do this through conflict resolution, we have a conflict resolution process that is based out of anger therapy, relational therapy. And so we work on active listening, we work on finding the win-win. And one of the caveats of that is those have to be scheduled because I have to be calm enough to talk about what's going on. Because if not, I'm all up in my amygdala and I cannot think of anything other than what I'm feeling in the moment. And so often we'll ask, is now a good time to talk? Or do you need 5 minutes? Do we need to do this afternoon? Do you need, what do you need to calm down? And mindfulness is a big part of what we do on campus. So they learn a bunch of tools to calm themselves down. They do different breathing techniques. They do different sensory techniques. They know things that work for them because they've tried them out. Once they're calm, though, the process that we use is, and I'm specifically thinking about a conflict, it's a script, especially for our elementary age learners down. And it's, I feel blank when you blank. I wish you would blank. And that's the script that they have to. I feel sad when you say that I'm bragging, when I celebrate something I've worked really hard to achieve. I wish you would celebrate with me. things like that. And then the other person, the other child, has to repeat back exactly what they hear, which is harder than it sounds because I'm always filtering what I hear based on how I feel. And so sometimes it could take 4 or 5 times for them to actually repeat back what the other person said. And then from there, then we go into the how we resolve this. Okay, so what would you like to happen in the future? I wish you would celebrate my successes. What would that look like? That would look like XYZ. Do you feel like that is reasonable? Can you do what so-and-so asked? No, that is absolutely not reasonable. Well, what suggestions do you have? And then we just go back and forth until they figure out, okay, we've come to an agreement, they shake on it, and then we go. But when they're in those intense emotions, we as guides are trained to stay very neutral. Like I do not feed off of whatever emotion you're having. The only time that doesn't happen is if something's starting to get dangerous. Like sometimes if the emotion is anger and they've yet to learn how to self-regulate, they can get themselves into a situation that could be dangerous for them or others. Then we might get in, and that's really the only time you'll ever hear me raise my voice on campus, not out of anger, but to get them to stop whatever that almost dangerous thing was. But in general, that's what we do. We get down on their level. Or like, how are you feeling right now? We identify with it. We empathize. Yeah, I have felt really sad like that too. It's terrible to get your feelings hurt because someone says, X, Y, Z. What would you like to do about that right now? Do you need when they're tiny, when they're like my 5, 6, and 7-year-olds, do you need a hug? Do you want someone to sit next to you? Do you need to go to the calm down corner? Do you need a stuffy? It's talking through, okay, they're here and this is what we do with them.
Yeah. Self-reflection is not a coping mechanism. Self-reflection is a learning mechanism. All of the tools that we talked about today, the asking yourself consecutive prompts, the getting feedback from outsiders, the outing yourself to other people, these things are not easy to do. They might not make you feel better when you do them. They will make you feel better after you do them.
Yeah.
And as you said, often before you self-reflect, you will need to do some sort of calming or coping mechanism.
Yep.
Because self-reflection is not the coping mechanism.
Yeah.
Self-reflection is the learning mechanism.
Powerful reminder, for sure.
I think it's also important for parents to do such self-reflection because they'll have more empathy on their kids.
Yeah.
Because as we're growing up, we might have experience bias. We'll feel like when I face this situation, I won't have certain feelings. But my children might have different feelings than me. So I think it's important for them to self-reflecting by themselves because once they know about their emotions, they can know more about their kids' emotions under similar situations. So like, I wonder if those parents can read the kids' notes about the script.
They can read their 360 reviews. As far as the conflict resolution script, we don't have something currently in place for that, but that would be a really fantastic idea because I do agree that those conversations with your children is how parents are involved in a learner-driven community. It's not checking homework and helping projects and that sort of thing. It's those really deep, really bonding conversations. And so that's a really great suggestion, actually. And I bet we could very easily implement that into the software that we track everything else on. So, well, Stephanie and Bosan, thank you so much for joining us today. I could talk about this for like days. So I really, really appreciate your time. Circling back to the question that started this episode, knowing what you know now, how would you rate your current self-reflection process? And from all of the tools and the ideas that were mentioned in this episode, is there anything new that you know that you would like to start implementing in your self-reflection processes? Thank you so much for your time, you guys, and we will see you all in the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope this episode has given you some great food for thought and provides a jumping off point for you and your family to have deep, meaningful conversations. Until next time.